So here's a little overview of what we typically do with clients first thing after they finish the functional movement screen. Sometimes during the functional movement screen, in fact. A lot of times movement dysfunction doesn't stem from a joint or tendon or ligament injury. It stems from poor tissue quality, and that can mean a number of things. That can mean that there is some impedance of neuromuscular communication. Body and the brain are not talking to each other. Maybe there was a previous injury there, and the body just doesn't want to let go, let that muscle do what it ought to do. Sometimes it's that multiple layers of muscle, which are supposed to function independently of one another, simply can't. They've become almost adhered to one another. The strongest muscle in the group takes over, and the range of motion just becomes limited. Sometimes it's vascular in nature, and the muscle just isn't getting the nutrient that it needs to. So a simple way to address those non-injury movement dysfunctions, and one that works very frequently, is self-myofascial release. Self, you do it yourself. Myofascial, myo, muscle, fascial, fascia, or the layer of connective tissue between layers of muscle, between motor units, between single cells of muscle, around an entire joint segment or limb that eventually becomes tendon, then ligament or joint capsule, and then periosteum, and then finally bone. Release, essentially just getting those layers of muscle to function independently of one another again. So we typically use one of two tools for soft tissue work or self-myofascial release. We use a foam roller for broad sheets of muscle, larger muscle groups, longer limbs. We use a lacrosse ball for smaller groups of muscle or more clumpy groups of muscle rather than broad expanses of muscle. In either case, self-myofascial release can do a number of things. First of all, it can improve circulation. You put pressure on the muscle, then take pressure off the muscle. You're essentially closing down the vasculature inside that muscle and then opening it back up. That encourages blood flow and lymphatic drainage to and from the muscle. We can deliver nutrients to the muscle when it's in need. We can remove metabolic byproducts and waste from the muscle when it's finished. So if it's good for circulation, it's good for just about everything. The second thing is neuromuscular communication. So if you haven't used a muscle for a while, especially if you've never done soft tissue work before or self-myofascial release before, you're in for a surprise. It's one of a handful of things that we can do to our body that not only is it okay if it hurts, but pain is an indicator that you're doing it correctly. In stretching, no pain. Mild to moderate discomfort, but nothing that you can't work through or relax into. In strength training, no pain. In conditioning or energy system development, an occasional burn, but not frequent. Self-myofascial release on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very minor pain, 10 being the most excruciating pain you've ever felt in your life. SMR should be somewhere in the 5 to 8 range. We get up into that 9 to 10 range on the pain scale, your body's going to fight back. You're not going to be able to relax into what we're attempting to do. Too light, and the pressure isn't going to be there to do what it needs to do. So it may be very simple mind to muscle communication at first. It may be a one-word language, ouch. But you're going to get the brain and the body communicating with one another. The third and final thing that self-myofascial release does is releases the junction between the muscle and the fascia and layers of muscle. It doesn't do this if you don't make it do this. In other words, it only really becomes self-myofascial release if certain techniques are utilized. So if I'm just rolling back and forth along a joint segment or a sheath of muscle on the foam roller, I'm going to be putting pressure into that muscle and into those layers of muscle. I might get a small amount of movement between the layers of muscle. Certainly not enough to restore independent function or to release adhesions in the muscle. However, if when I'm on a trouble spot, I stop and I make my joints move above or below where I'm rolling on the foam roller, that's when I'm going to get what massage therapists call the pin and stretch action. So I'm going to hold the muscle in place, I'm going to make the joint above or below it move, and that's going to create movement between the layers of muscle. That's when we're going to really get some myofascial release. So those are the three things that we get from myofascial release. We get better circulation, we get better mind to muscle communication, and we can actually achieve myofascial release. It's a great way to make your massage therapist's job easier by taking care of your tissue quality between visits to your massage therapist. It's not a substitute for massage therapy. Particularly something like cupping, where the muscle, instead of being pressed into, is being lifted away from the skeleton. This creates a different stimulus entirely. And there really is no substitute for human touch when it comes to the myriad of physiological benefits that we can get from massage therapy that we just can't get from self-myofascial release. But as a warm-up, as preparation for movement, and as an in-between maintenance plan between appointments with your massage therapist, self-myofascial release can really do the trick. And it can start restoring function in our movements before we've even done a corrective exercise.